Dandy's World is a game with characters that come off as one note on the surface, but when you dig deeper, you learn about these characters' insecurities or fears that make them more well-rounded. V is a game show host worried about being upgraded. Shelly is a dinosaur lover insecure about being too boring. And Bassie is a main character scared about losing that title to her own friend. But then there's Sprout, who still doesn't have any clear insecurities or fears that make us understand this character past surface level things, so he doesn't really even feel like a main character. Mains usually have a lot of pent up emotions that eventually turn them twisted, but Sprout never gets a real chance to show them. So in this video, I'm going to propose some ideas to make Sprout more interesting. Additionally, I gave him a new twisted design, some new sound design, and new mechanics. To start, let's go over his... To preface, I got all my information from Cosmo and Sprout's section of the wiki, as well as some of the gossip. So if there's any information that I missed, comment below. The biggest problem I have with Sprout as a character is that he has no further depth beyond being overly caring and Cosmo being his best friend. But I have some issues with this. The first issue I have is the missed potential of his overcaring nature. One thing we learn about Sprout is how caring he is to the other toons. Most of his conversations show how he wants to see how everyone's doing, and he likes to look after the other toons' emotional and physical well-being. The interesting thing is when the other toons ask about Sprout's well-being, he either changes the subject or gives a basic answer. For example, when Astro checks in on Sprout, Sprout changes the subject to be about desserts, so Astro drops the subject. When he talks with Poppy and she asks him if he's okay, he just gives a simple, yeah. The most weird instance is when Cosmo asks if Sprout's okay, and Sprout jokingly copies him until Cosmo answers the question first. Even after that, Sprout just gives a nod or simple, I'm okay. You would expect these vague answers to mean that Sprout might be hiding his true feelings. Like, what if Sprout likes to help with other people's problems because he doesn't want to confront his own? Or what if Sprout helps others with their problems so much that he forgets to focus on himself and it causes him to be a hypocrite? But we don't get anything. We get small glimpses of character, like Gordy's gossip show that Sprout is hard on himself when he forgets to bake his cookies one year, but we don't get to see more of this side of him. And the reason for that is that most conversations about Sprout relate to Cosmo, which leads to my second problem with Sprout. The second problem I have with Sprout is his relationship with Cosmo. I need to go over this because it's heavily implied that Cosmo is the main reason for Sprout turning twisted. Sprout likes Cosmo more than any other toon. In multiple conversations, he always wants Cosmo to be with him. Most toons talk about how they barely see them apart, and he has a ton of matching skins and even matching trinkets. But the question I'm asking is, why is Cosmo this important to Sprout? We see them being nice to each other, we even get a storyboard of when they met, and Sprout is even willing to put himself in front of a fire for him, but it all feels superficial. If you want me to care about this relationship that is so important to his lore, then you have to establish why it's important. Here is a suggestion that can fix my problems. Make Cosmo the first person that Sprout opens up to. Instead of the Sprout tape we have now, which doesn't tell us a lot other than Sprout and Cosmo starts fires and Sam the handler is always there to put them out, which is not new information. Instead, what if the tape shows a private moment with Sprout and Cosmo? What if Cosmo sees that Sprout is overworking himself with baking, so Cosmo offers to help? But like always, Sprout says he doesn't need any help. But Cosmo knows he does need help, so he decides to help Sprout anyway. After they finish baking, Sprout opens up to Cosmo and tells him how he's been feeling overworked and how he could never feel like he could tell anyone because people depend on him too much. Cosmo could then tell Sprout that he doesn't have to do this alone and from now on he will help him. This would also show why he becomes overprotective of Cosmo. This would be the first time he had someone to depend on, so he overindulges and clings to Cosmo, becoming too dependent on him. It doesn't need to be a whole melodramatic moment, but they barely give us any information to understand Sprout on a deeper level, or his relationship with Cosmo. Honestly, the relationship is kind of toxic. Not a lot, but there are a few moments that make me raise an eyebrow. Like I talked before, there was his conversation with Cosmo. Cosmo tries to check in on Sprout, and Sprout doesn't take it seriously and turns Cosmo's concern for him into a game. Also, Sprout gets kind of aggressive whenever Cosmo gets brought up. Sprout slightly threatens Shrimpo when Shrimpo insults Cosmo's cooking. Sprout also threatens Roger when he asks for an interview and immediately tells him to not go to Cosmo because it's safer for him not to. The last thing to mention is when Scraps even mentions the thought of him and Scraps being friends, he immediately shuts her down. Like, bro, chill, she's just trying to be goofy. And I wouldn't mind if the relationship is kind of toxic, but the developers obviously want the relationship to be seen as cute and wholesome. He's a main, so he should be emotionally unstable like the other mains, but we barely get any traits that reflect this. One last thing to mention about Sprout and Cosmo is that they have a relationship with fire, which really doesn't lead into anything, but it's brought up so many times, so it's weird that it doesn't. Cosmo tells Astro that he sometimes dreams about fire. Cosmo is traumatized when he sees a cookie's eyes melt. Sprout and Cosmo constantly mention if they forgot to turn off the oven. The Sprout tape shows Sprout's handler putting out a fire. A note says Sam is always busy with Sprout because he has to make sure he doesn't burn the place down. Some pictures have a weird focus on fires, like why is the flame so big? This has more foreshadowing than that Toon Turf pilot if anyone watched that, but it doesn't lead to anything other than Cosmo and Sprout giving Sam PTSD because they can't afford oven alarms. But I have an idea that could make this aspect interesting. But first, we should take a look at Sprout's. The design is honestly fine. It is another instance of making the Toon taller, kind of like Twisted V, but at least they gave him a large claw and a sharp scarf to show that he's an actual threat. The most interesting part of the design is that the ichor sprayed on Sprout is the exact opposite of Cosmo. Sprout has no ichor on his right eye and arm, while Cosmo only has ichor on his right eye and arm. I have a theory that these ichor marks are supposed to represent burn marks. What if one day Sam was busy with something else and the oven caught fire again, but since Sam wasn't there to help, the oven exploded? Sprout goes in front of Cosmo like he does in the Sprout tape and takes most of the blast, while Cosmo only takes a little. The only problem with this theory is that there's no evidence of an oven explosion, but this line of thinking could also lead to how Sprout became a Twisted. Sprout's Twisted description says that Sprout is lonely, and that is a factor in how Sprout became Twisted. I think the handlers or the founders permanently separate Cosmo and Sprout because they see that them being together is too dangerous because of all the fires they cause. After being isolated from someone Sprout emotionally depended on, Sprout turns Twisted. This could be an interesting idea if Dandy's World told us more about Sprout, but since they don't, all the community has to work with our theories. With that, let's move on to the... First, some context to know before you see my redesign. My redesign goes with the idea I proposed, where Sprout and Cosmo get into an oven accident, and the handlers separate them to avoid further accidents from happening. After losing someone that Sprout was emotionally dependent on, he starts to distance himself from everyone. In his final moments before becoming Twisted, Sprout goes to the kitchen where the accident happened and he starts to blame himself for it, and the memory of the explosion plays in his mind before he finally turns Twisted due to guilt, despair, and doomed Yowie. Now that you know my Sprout's lore, now we can move on to the actual design. For his design, I kind of went in so many directions for this one. I knew that I wanted to incorporate the oven in my design to show that Sprout feels so guilty that he absorbs with his biggest mistake, but it was kind of difficult finding out the rest of the design. I wanted to incorporate vines to his design, so I made him walk on vine spider legs and made Sprout an arachnocentaur, which is a creature with a normal top half but with a spider bottom half. After these first ideas, I kind of went crazy with the design. First, I wanted to give Sprout a Venus flytrap mouth, but I decided to scrap it because it was kind of hard to make it fit without the jaw clipping through the body. Then I thought it would be cool if Sprout crawled out of the oven. Then somehow I made his normal hands into spider hands, but at this point it barely resembled Sprout anymore, so I just went back to the arachnocentaur route. The last thing I made were fires. They will be important in the mechanics section. With that, here's the final render of Twisted Sprout. Just so you know, this took 2 hours to render because of the fire, a less than 30-second animation. Anyway, let's move on to the... I'm not a fan of distractors because it ruins the point of surviving and it makes the game not fun, so I made a mechanic that makes it harder to distract. When Sprout sees someone and chases them, he releases a few flames that trail behind him, and if you touch the flames you take damage. After a few seconds the flames will disappear, then after a set amount of seconds, let's say 10, he will spit out more flames, then rinse and repeat. This mechanic would shake up distractors quite a bit, or it won't because some distractors are a different breed. Another mechanic that would be interesting is if there was a fire alarm. On floors with Sprout, a fire alarm would play if he ever uses his fire ability, and when the alarm goes off, it makes a very disturbing or very annoying alarm sound. On floors with blackouts, the fire alarm would make the room flash red all over. When the alarm plays, Pebble's speak ability and air horns would not affect Twisteds anymore because the sound of the fire alarm is too loud. To turn off the alarm, there would be reset switches placed around the map and you only need to press one to turn off the alarm. But after you reset one, it would have a cooldown of a minute before you can use that one again. I added the cooldown to make sure distractors don't camp near a switch. Think of this as a mini floor event that encourages people to try and avoid Sprout instead of purposely trying to get seen by him. Now that you know the mechanics, let's end off with... Sprout probably has some of the best sound design in the game. The growling and groaning sound effects are pretty sinister. The branch crunching sound effects are pretty eerie as well. And hearing him call out for Cosmo is a nice touch. For my redesign, I would keep the growls, branch crunchings, and the shrieks the same, but I added a few more sounds for my redesign. Here they are now. Then with that, that's my Twisted Sprout redesign. I am very proud of it and I hoped you liked it as well. If you enjoy videos like this, maybe consider dropping a like and a subscribe. With that being said, I hope you have a good day and see you later.